Never ask anyone how the day is. It's really boring. Men who are good at doing that stuff and that can socialize well in person and portray themselves as they are and get themselves across well, do well on dating apps. Men that couldn't do that in person often struggle to do that on dating apps. Take your time in creating the profile. Like, liaise with the people in your life. Like, if you do have some female friends, turn to them and be like, hey, what do you think about this? They can walk into a room and they can gauge the room and they can interact with people. You want to be with a man like that because he can create safety for you.
Okay, on the show today, David Chambers. He's a men's relationship coach, a dating coach, also a podcaster. I've been on his podcast. It was a good experience. He seemed like a good guy. So I said, David, come on, mate, let's have a chat. David, welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Good to see you again.
Let's dive in. A lot of people say dating apps are rubbish. Do you agree?
Not completely. I think that dating apps are just another window into dating, or another platform to use. You know, I'm old enough, and I'm sure you're old enough to remember the days when you didn't have apps and you didn't have online ways. So you used to have to walk up to women in bars, the street, clubs, coffee shops, and all manner of other places, and actually start conversations. And what I find with the men that I work with, the men I've worked with over the years, and even friends, is men who are good at doing that stuff and that can socialize well in person and portray themselves as they are and get themselves across well, do well on dating apps. Men that couldn't do that in person often struggle to do that on dating apps. There isn't a 1-to-1 100%, but I find in general that's a pretty rule of thumb that I've noticed.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely remember the time before dating apps. I mean, I think I got laid all 5 times at university. I think, and I was surrounded by women on my psychology course, but I didn't have that skill set to talk to them. I didn't have the ability to just. When I later learned that, I was like, "Oh, I wish I'd had that skill set when I was at university, surrounded by girls." Because I developed it traveling. You know, when you're traveling, you have to go and talk to them and find out where the buses are, and you have to get past that. But people think of me as a very confident, outgoing person, but I wasn't always as sort of easily talk to strangers. That is a skill set. And I wonder though if texting isn't a different skill set, because I still get told I'm reasonably personable in real life. I'm a horrible texter, but that strikes. And there's certain people who are lovely, warm, attractive, in embodiment terms, very sexy people, but maybe it isn't. I don't want to be mean, but not everyone's photogenic. So there seems to be there are different things involved.
Yeah, the different skill sets. Like, I'd say I look back at my 20s and just think I wish I'd spent more time stopping and reading through text messages, because I used to just like smash them out as quickly as possible and move on to the next thing. And being dyslexic meant that sometimes I've looked back at text messages days later and gone, I don't understand what I was trying to say. So there's no way that she understood what I was trying to say. And that's the thing. There's all different skill sets. Like, there's the in-person piece. There's being able to portray yourself well to people, like actually communicate who you are to the people that are in front of you, or if we're talking about dating apps, looking at your profile in a way that they can consume. I think that's a really important part of what I'm seeing as like self-awareness. Self-awareness isn't just knowing yourself. It's being able to have knowing how you impact other people as well. And I think that often for men is the missing piece. Actually, both sides of the coin is often missing for men. They're not able to kind of like go, oh, who am I? What am I about? And can I put that onto a profile so that people can understand who I am in a way that's kind of true to me, but also they don't really have a clue around what potentially women are looking for the various types of relationship that those men might be looking for.
I mean, essentially, a lot of it is an exercise in empathy. If we're sort of putting it like, okay, I might like a picture of me holding my fish because I'm a fisherman, but is that actually? This is a real example. Like in East Europe, apparently, it's very, very common for men to be displaying their fish in pictures. That's quite a serious thing. I'm told by my Ukrainian friends. Polish. So it's an exercise in empathy, but it's also sort of an exercise in marketing as well. It's horrible to think of it that way, but it's an exercise in marketing doesn't involve empathy. What does this person want? Am I appealing to that? And is that actually a fit for reality? So there's also the piece there of like, you could end up with a lot of the wrong partners, I imagine, if you were very, very good at imagining what people wanted. And there also seems that thing that everyone's playing the game of, well, what does she or he want? So I'm going to try and play to that. But is that real? And then before you know it, you're like 7 levels. It's kind of crazy, mate. Thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that people, I think a lot of guys, there's like a place, I think, on the spectrum of like just thinking about who you are and what you want, and only putting your attention on what you think she wants or what women want, right? And then the problem where we're putting our attention on what we think women want is what is the skew and the kind of narrative we have in our heads about what women want, right? Like a lot of guys that I end up speaking to are like, women just want a man with money and good looks and who seems like he has lots of women. And then I often say to them, so that's what you're embodying in your profile. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, how's that going for you? And they're like, really badly. And I'm like, yes, because your narrative is really like off to some degree, especially if you're a man, you're a mature man, right? You're in your 30s and 40s and you actually want a relationship. It's very different if you're 22 years old and you're just trying to look flash to other 22-year-old women who are, you know, their brains haven't fully developed yet. They're still figuring out who they are and they're not really sure about certain things about life and relationship and so forth. They can be attracted by shiny objects just due to their not materialism, more to do with their maturity. But if you're shifting into this kind of older set where you're looking for a more mature woman, a more self-aware woman, then it's a very different skill set what you're trying to portray yourself. And I think what's one of the mistakes a lot of men make is partly to do their own kind of empathy, and they haven't thought about like, okay, if I'm a woman and I want a partner who's going to be a good man to have children with and live my life with and create a future with, how do I want to come across as that sort of person? And also sometimes what I've noticed with a lot of men is they're trying to pretend to be someone that they're not. And that very subtly can be really caught out in a dating profile, right?
Women are great at spotting that sort of bullshit as well, right? They're
very, very good. Very good. I was doing this thing every Friday where I'd take a man's dating profile and I'd put it up on my Instagram as a story. And I'd ask women just to give me feedback on it. Like, how could this be better? And it was remarkable, some of the things that women would say, and not just individual women. I mean, like themes that would come through, like in the most subtle ways. And I'd ask women sometimes, like, "Oh, why do you think that this guy is, say, not congruent with what he's saying, or he's trying to be funny in a way that he thinks is going to make women laugh?" And they'd give me an explanation. And some of these guys I knew, some of them, they were clients of mine or men I've spoken to a couple of times. And I'd be like, it's remarkable from a few photos and, you know what, a few hundred words, less than a few hundred words, right? That you have understood someone in a way that they may not even see themselves. It's like so much gets communicated, but if you're not aware of it, you just miss it.
And if we think of the evolutionary force here, pregnancy is very expensive for women. And childbirth in our evolution could kill women.
Yeah,
it still occasionally does, but it definitely used to in the past. So there's something which is incredibly difficult, makes women vulnerable, takes thousands and thousands of calories, which is sort of how evolutionary psychologists think about things, and could kill you. One would expect there to be a pretty serious evolutionary pressure on women to be developing the skill of mate selection, much more so than men who can't die in childbirth and, you know, sperm is cheap kind of thing, right? But in calorific terms, I don't know how much it costs on the black market, but certainly, you know, in terms of evolutionary terms. So it's like one would expect them to have developed that skill.
Yeah, totally. And so women have this kind of sixth sense. And I was come back to this thing of humor, right? Like, you know, when they survey women and they ask them what they want in a man, like humor and kindness comes up again and again, right? And I sat with ChatGPT once and I was like, why is humor so important? And went back and forth. I had some of my own ideas, but one of the things that kind of out of the conversation I had with ChatGPT was humor shows social intelligence, right? If someone is humorous and calibrated, right, they're socially intelligent, means that they can walk into a room and they can gauge the room and they can interact with people. You want to be with a man like that because he can create safety for you, you know, if you have to go and visit a new tribe and, you know, if you look in evolutionary purposes, right, a man who comes across new people, if he's able to make friends with those people and get along with them quickly, you're always going to be safe. You're always going to be okay. Your offspring are going to take on that skill as well. Whereas someone who struggles to be socially calibrated right? Will ostracize people, has the potential of becoming doing things that are embarrassing and awkward and potentially dangerous that would leave you in a position where you're socially isolated, right? And, from an evolutionary point of view, social isolation led to our near and certain death.
Yeah, so humor shows abstraction. So it's cognitive intelligence as well as social relational intelligence, creativity, stress management. It's hard to be funny when you're stressed. That's why you think of all the good jokes later and not at the time, right? You think of the great put down after the fight's finished. I'm going to come back with that line, So it shows stress management, which I think is always sort of manly, that you're cool, calm, and collected. There's a reason there's a stereotype of that as attractive. Yes, and just cognitive IQ, verbal IQ. I guess a lot of what we do as human beings, we're paid for and given status for, is essentially verbal acuity of various kinds, verbal ability. So most humor fits into that category. I think there is another part to this, though, which is, and I've definitely found this to be true, women find men they find attractive funny, not that they find funny men attractive. Now, I think it's both things. And I've also discovered over the years that asking women what they find attractive is almost an entire waste of time.
Yes.
Like their behavior doesn't match up with the words. Because I used to have a lot of female friends when I was a teenager. Like I had loads of female friends. And I used to always ask them advice. And I'd take their advice. It never worked. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, who are they actually fucking? As opposed to telling me who they fuck. And then I went, oh, these things have almost no Venn diagram. So, yeah, thoughts on asking women's advice on women?
There is I really agree with you. It's something I've seen, right? And there's even people who do surveys, there's like, they have to correlate for the fact that people say what they think they should say and they say what they think is acceptable, not necessarily what they do. And also they have to account for the fact that due to people's lack of self-awareness, they may think they're making choices from this, like, oh, I want someone good and kind, but they're making their choices from dysfunctional wounding and so forth. They're attracted to the person that's going to hurt them and treat them badly, opposed to actually being completely attracted to the person they want. But added to that, there is a way. I think what often there's this idea that like women want bad boys, right? And I think there's this for me, there's this kind of middle place where you're a kind, decent man who can lead himself, who may be fun and builds a life for himself, but also has like boundaries and an edge, right, to who he is. So you kind of straddle this kind of middle plane, right, where you are
song about in between. That, right? They want a good boy, a bad boy. I mean, and essentially, women are in a very difficult situation because they want someone who's gentle enough to take care of them and their kids, but fierce enough to kill anyone who would hurt them and their kids. And like that's a pretty tricky balance. I always feel like kind of sorry for women to have to, and as men, we have to be the fierce, kind guy, the good guy with boundaries, right? Like that's tricky. Young guys can hear that and easily get the wrong message, couldn't they?
Yeah. And I think for young guys, it's actually really difficult because, I say most people in their 20s aren't necessarily looking for a long-term partner in marriage, right?
Yeah.
It's just not something, and we're not in that point in our lives as well, so we have the kind of self-awareness and foresight of what that is. One thing I will add in is, if we kind of look at this from a point of view, kind of attachment styles, you've got like, avoidant, you've got anxious people, you've got disorganized people, and you've got secure people. The secure people are the most likely people to actually, when it comes to kind of dating, go for the thing they say they're going to go for. They want, right? It's the people on the other ends that are more dysfunctional. And I use the word dysfunctional to describe myself and even some of my clients. They'll say we want someone kind, someone anxious, for instance, like I want someone who's going to treat me well and respect my boundaries, and then be attracted to the person that actually is going to ignore them a lot of the time and be hot and cold. So it's not always as black and white, but it can be a very confusing landscape. And that's why I think that as men, instead of always trying to put our attention on what we think women want, is actually coming back to being clear on the sort of woman we would like, right? But also coming back to like who we are and doing the work there and being like building that life. I think there's a lot to be said for like a man building a life that he loves and enjoys and allowing that to radiate beyond him into his dating life, into his relationship, into his friendships. And then this whole dating apps thing, doesn't really become such a problem. You know, I see with the men I speak to and my occasional client, again, men who have lives, I mean that in the nicest sense, right? They have active lives that they enjoy, where they do things, they're involved in community. Those men are not crying and complaining about dating apps, right? Because that's just one of the many ways they meet people. They meet people through friends, they meet people through events to go to. They're walking around and doing things. It's the men who, I always say it this way, they're sitting at home in their boxers, eating crisps, swiping on dating apps for 3 to 5 hours a day. They're the ones that are really angry because they got no other avenue, and the avenue they're using feels really frustrating.
Right. So it's less frustrating if guys are meeting some, women in social circles. They're good guys with lots of friends. They're getting introduced to people's sisters and colleagues. Like if you've got a rich, full life, a great sense of life purpose, that's very attractive for sure. You're surrounded by good guys. Like people, when I broke up with my wife, after about a year, people started trying to hook me up with their students and friends and sisters, and I was like, this is great, because I just had pretty good network. I was like, I didn't need Tinder. It wasn't necessary. And as you say, women are attracted to different things. Do you think that's a timing thing? Do you think that sometimes I hear people say there's 2 tracks of female attraction? It's like dating and mating. Or there's the guy they want to fuck and there's the guy they want to settle down with, right? Like, how do you see that? Or is it times of life? Like, I met my current partner when she was 35. She was just like, I want to settle down and have kids. I was like, me too. She was like, fantastic. That's the most attractive thing. She didn't want any bad boy stuff. That would have been if I'd have been like, yeah, I was doing drugs and fucking some chicks. She would have been like, that's really unattractive because I'm 35 and I want to settle down, right? I want to have kids. I want a sensible man. So for her, it was maybe a timing thing. But I think some people do it simultaneously, or they find themselves attracted to a guy, but then realizing he's bad. Like I'm coaching someone who's attracted to a bad boy, but knows it's not good for her. But the heart wants what the heart wants. And he's a mechanic and he's got big hands. And, it's like thoughts on this sort of double track of attraction women seem to have.
Yeah, I think there's a level of like emotional maturity and learning to kind of train ourselves to be attracted to that actually matters. Like, I think there's a immaturity and you could just argue, put it down that immaturity is about, have I done the work on myself where I might be attracted to the mechanic with the big hands, but actually I have enough awareness to go, this isn't going to be what I want it to be. And this is not going to be good for me. And I want what's good for me. Have I tended to the various aspects of my psyche and kind of calm those and brought those not necessarily into line, but I've just like explored them enough that actually what is kind of reactively attractive, I know actually, no, that's just going to be shit for me. I don't want that. I'm going to actually move towards what's going to be good for me in my life purpose. So I think there's a saying that a few guys I know, coaches I know, I guess, it's like some guys often are like attracted to crazy hot women, right? Not to say women are crazy if you listen to this, but there's some people that feel like, they're unstable, right? And I always say with those guys, if that's what you're attracted to, that's reflecting that something in you feels that feels exciting. And that's the work to do. So I think with some women, you're always going to have women who they do have these 2 tracks and they're running at the same time. But I think a lot of people, they have this experience of life at some point, not always, where they're, just they're playing the field, they're interested in what's out there, and they might be attracted to what's not necessarily good for them. But I think there comes a point of maturing where you go, no, I've had that enough, and I can see there's a pattern, and I'm going to do something internally about this pattern. And when I feel that anxiety and slight feeling of loss or low confidence someone makes me feel, I'm going to stop attaching that to me, that this chemistry, and I desire that, and starting kind of tuning the nervous system to that calm, gentle, loving, fun person who's going to be like a wonderful long-term partner.
I remember when I started being attracted to kind women, it was such a relief. I remember years ago, I said to my therapist, you never guess what's happened. I'm starting to find kind women attractive. And he was like, well done, Mark. You've healed some trauma, you know? I was like, this is amazing. Before that, it was like really bitchy, cold girls, you know? Or, you know, some people, it's the chaotic. The stereotypes could be like the Russian or the Colombian, you know? Like for me, it was the cold girls who weren't giving much affection. For someone else, it might be the chaotic one who just is clearly just like red flags everywhere. That's the thing now, right? The kids are all into red flags and green flags. Do you think it's valid? Do you think it's just a way of, it's kind of a nice way of talking about signals that people give off? Thoughts on flags?
Simplistic, isn't it? It's very simplistic. I think one of the problems with a lot of dating and relationship advice in general is we put out these very kind of binaries, like this thing is good, right? And then if I want to believe that because that matches my worldview or the view I have of myself, I'm going to go, oh yeah, that's good. I want that. The thing is that it's going to be different for different people, right? Like I'll take myself, for instance, when I've met my partner now, something was really important to me is I wanted a woman who was sexually adventurous, right? And sexually open, right? Important to me. And I didn't care about her sexual history. I cared enough I wanted to know about it. Not necessarily in this kind of controlling way, but out of curiosity, like, oh, have you been to sex clubs? Great. Awesome. Big tick for me. Yeah. Type of thing. Whereas I imagine for another man, maybe I'm a good Christian fundamentalist, looking for a trad wife. That might be really a huge red flag for me, right?
Yeah, red flag for me.
So it comes down to different things with different people. And I think, there's some common things like, good communication and emotional attunement and kindness and those sorts of things. But I think there's a lot of green and red flags that are very personal. And I think we have to do the kind of introspection to go, okay, what is it that I actually want? And was in alignment with the kind of future that I'm trying to build with somebody, and not just listening to the latest person on Instagram for all my dating advice to reinforce my existing dysfunctional ideas about myself and dating. Because that's something I'm seeing a lot, is that people we listen to the things that make us feel better and make us feel right, instead of listening to the things that make us feel really fucking uncomfortable and help us grow.
Okay, yeah. There's a particular thing female friends do when I tell them the truth, as I see it about dating, is they hit me, they punch me like on the shoulder, and they'll say, "Shut up, Mark, you're a Nazi or something," And then they'll say, "But tell me more." And what they're acknowledging, because they're smart women, my friends, is they're acknowledging like, okay, this is worth hearing, but I don't like it. I don't like it, and it seems that particularly around this topic, it's very easy to be drawn to that which reinforces a worldview. And that might be a romantic worldview, an idealistic worldview, or it could be like a red pill guy who, women just want your money. And I look around and go, it doesn't seem that case to me. Most women seem, that doesn't seem to be a thing for most of them. Some, but not most. But it's very easy to just find the thing on the internet that reinforces your view of the opposite sex are dangerous, the opposite sex are all this or that. It's like, how do we know who to listen to? Because it's such a big topic. You almost like have to have multiple points of view. I've spoken to pickup artists and learned something. I've spoken to feminists and learned something. I've spoken to like spiritual tantra Bali girls and learned something. These people are pretty different, but they all feel like they've got part of the picture. And it's almost like the whole picture is too painful or too difficult for any one person to get a hold of. Thoughts on that, David? I'm rambling.
I'm like you. I've experienced. I've been in all these. I could say at one point in my life I was a pickup artist. I've studied tantra for a number of years and done all the good relationship kind of coaching stuff and read the books. And I think that there's value in all of them. And actually, there's probably some level of thread that runs through a lot of these, right? Even if it doesn't appear to be, there's some wonderful things we can take from pickup artists, which was around, say, for instance, getting involved in life, getting out there, talk to people, and so forth. The Bali women, they have self-expression in there, like ravaging, raw self-expression, which is really enticing. It's really enticing to see a woman who just like is in her body and she's feeling and she's expressing, those things are there. And then, the wonderful relationship coaches about communication and grounded communication. There's all these different things. And I think that one of the things we have to I think to lean towards often is what feels uncomfortable. Is there somewhere, there's something for us to learn about ourselves there. If we keep
Yes.
moving towards us, what makes us feel right, like and justified and like, oh, you see, I was right all along.
Yes.
I was correct. All we're doing is reinforcing this ego that we have. And we're not allowing ourselves to kind of expand and learn about the kind of more edgy parts of us that we might be uncomfortable with, where we actually help us kind of smooth out our kind of triggers and our deficiencies.
Okay, just as long as I don't have to date tantra girls because they're fucking crazy. Okay, so
but they are fun.
They are fun. There's lots to be learned there. Polarity, and there's all sorts of things. And their bodies is great. I feel very lucky, actually, in the embodiment scene that I've had a bunch of partners and girlfriends who are just in their bodies. To me, that's just a very attractive, cool thing. Like girls I've met at dance, contact improv, fire rhythms or something. You know, the whole embodiment definitely makes people more attractive. And been very lucky to be around women who have that, you know, that embodiedness, which is so much more attractive to me than the average sort of London lawyer who's in her head. Yeah. Let's go back to the online thing. I feel like there's one piece that maybe young male listeners will think is not fair. So first of all, David, you're a relatively attractive guy. You're, I'm guessing, not short, right? Like that's, how tall are you?
6'1".
Okay, 6'1". So all the short guys are immediately, the short kings out there are just going, what? This guy can't talk to us. Okay, you've got some social status, you've got a podcast, you've got the social skills. A lot of young guys just can't get a match. It seems like the apps, which is how most people meet people, because it's increasingly dangerous to meet someone through social approach and talking to people in the workplace. You know, that's a risk. And I'm noticing young people just don't have those skills. Like I talk to young people quite regularly just in Slovenia, not in a dating sense, but just in a sort of making friends, hanging out, kind of being Irish sense. And they just don't have the skills to interact compared to older people. Like an old guy in the supermarket will chat back, even if his English isn't very good. The young person not. So they can't really do it in real life. So they are forced into online dating. Unless they're going to go on this difficult journey of learning approach and, you know, all that. And a lot of guys, there's a mathematics to it, that a small percentage of tall, good-looking guys with good photo shoots are getting the massive of matches. Because I've had one friend who's a PT in London, mixed race, I'd fuck him and I'm not even gay. And his Tinder was just bing, 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 just blowing up the whole time, right? And I was like, dude, your experience of online dating is so different than mine. So what do you say to those guys who are just like, I'm just not getting a single match. I'm not getting a chance to practice my texting with girls.
Mm-hmm. The first thing I say is, you know, it's going to be a hard truth, is like, you need to learn those skills, those in-person skills, because
right,
we could sit and craft the perfect profile for you, right? And then what's going to happen? You're going to have to text her. And then what's going to happen there? It's going to end. Or you get through that and then you get to the date and you sit there awkwardly because you struggle to make conversation, right? And then it's going to end anyway. And you're just kicking the frustration down the can. So ultimately, is the first thing I always say to guys is like, get involved in life. Yeah. So many of these young kids, and I don't want to sound like some old guy, right? So many young people, their whole lives are happening in online only spaces where there's not actually much kind of self-expression and talking and kind of the social attunement that gets learned, right? So it's the first one is like, get outside and get in the world. You know, there's so much community like coming up from the roots to the ground. Everywhere I look, so every time I speak to someone new, I'm like, oh, what are you up to? And they're like, I've joined this community, or I'm starting this community. Like, there's so many communities starting where it makes the barrier to kind of entry and getting to know people much lower for you, so you can get used to that. But if this person insists on the dating apps, right, you've got to create a profile. You've got to do some things on your profile, like good photos, good quality photos. Simple as that. Good quality photos just go such a long way. We're talking that's 90% of the thing that show you, you know, smiling, good lighting, with friends, you know, a mixture of these sorts of things. And then also, you know, part of it's getting a life, but it's also being able to express your life, like what you do and who you are and the things you're up to that are interesting to you. You're curious about the world into the box that's there, whether that's on Tinder and you just got some words, or if you've got kind of prompts to use. But you've got to like surface some of this. And also, one of the things I notice for a lot of men, what they do is when they create a profile, they're so anxious and worried and projecting about the fear they have about it not working. So in the moment that they're doing it, they just rush through the whole thing. They just rush it.
Right.
They want to just get it done, where it's a bit like men and sex sometimes, right? They realize there's an opportunity of sex in front of them. They start having sex. They're like, oh my God, I'm having sex. Oh my God, I don't know when the next time's going to come. And then before they know it, it's all done. And then they lie back and they're like, oh shit, that happened quickly. They're trying to expel some anxiety. So take your time in creating the profile. Like liaise with the people in your life. Like if you do have some female friends, turn to them and be like, hey, what do you think about this?
Years ago, I A/B tested all my Tinder photos. A/B testing is a term for marketing. I basically just got like 50 female friends, students, colleagues, people that I trusted, that I had a good relationship with. And I just said A or B. And honestly, I was surprised. And and this is a sense I do trust their opinion. Like 90% were saying A or B. It wasn't subtle in normally every case. And I was like, oh, what about B? I look kind of cool. They're like, you look weird. Don't use that one. And I was like, this has saved me so much drama. So yeah, definitely. Or just, here's another one. I remember giving my phone to my friend Pearl. Pearl, if you're out there, I love you. Good mate. And I was saying, does anything here make me sound like an axe murderer? And she found 3 things in my bio. I was like, what? That's funny. She's like, that's scary. Like, I don't think men often underestimate the sort of danger women put themselves in a dating situation, right? And like, it's like she was like, yeah, that's creepy, that's scary, that makes you sound weird. She's like, delete those 3 things. I was like, that's fucking great. Thanks, Pearl.
Yeah. Like I think sometimes as men, what we do, we write our profile and we're like, oh my God, my boys would laugh at that. That's going to be so funny. It's a bit like the fish, right? Like putting the fish in, the fish, the gym selfie as well, the topless selfie in the gym, whatever it is. We're like, oh, my mates would think that's really cool and great. And it's like, well, yeah, your mates think it's really cool, but you're not dating your mate Brian, right? So you need to sanity check
Brian's
this with
nice.
somebody. He means well.
I like
but if
Brian,
Brian's got a wife, and if Brian's got a wife,
different.
sit and talk to Brian's wife. Like, hey, what do you think of this? Because it's otherwise we're just in our own kind of head about what we think looks right. Because so often there's pictures of us and we're like, we think the picture's really cool. And the reason why we think the picture's really cool is because there's a memory attached to that picture that is great for us. We were at the F1 or it was the day that we finished that marathon or whatever, but that person who's going to look at your picture doesn't know that story and they just get that snapshot of where you look a bit weird or one of your eyes is a bit half closed.
Women will see details. Like I've shown women pictures of me I said, look at this talk of me in front of 1,000 people. Look at the high status, social proof. And women have gone, too try hard, and I don't like your shoes. I'm like, how can you see my shoes? It's tiny. They've like picked this like tiny thing, and I've gone, wow. And like I have to crop my shoes out now. So I've been really surprised by what people have seen in the same pictures. That I had a good memory, as you say, or whatever. Let's talk about texting.
One more thing. One thing I realized that I've coached photographers, I've coached artists, I've coached musicians. Men who have an understanding and appreciation for aesthetics, like putting colors together, they can take a photograph, they paint or some level, or they work in fashion or something like that. Those men very rarely struggle on dating apps because they understand aesthetics. They understand, most of us don't understand like the science of a photograph, right? Or how to make things look good. And the men that can make things look good, again, they always do well on dating apps.
I'm feeling insecure about my little recording studio under the stairs now. I've got a horrible sheet behind me. I've got food on my T-shirt that is just out of camera shot. People, if we aren't on YouTube, David's setup's much nicer. He's got a plant and some color-coded books. The aesthetic's much nicer than mine. Nicely put together. Let's talk texting. So I'm a horrible texter. I agree with you on the photos. I used to have professional photos for my work, and they were often in sort of high status positions. Obviously, the photographer selected ones where I didn't look ugly. I was usually well dressed at work. So, the pictures were pretty good. So I used to get matches. And I'd say, particularly when I was abroad, it's another piece of advice I'd have for men is go where you're popular. Like there are countries, for instance, like if people are on YouTube, David's a black guy. There are countries where he will not get matches just because of that. We can say that's racist, whatever, but it's just true. And there's countries where that's Colombia. People weren't into it there. No.
Not into
Okay,
it.
interesting. I didn't know that. And in certain countries, he'd do even better than average, right? So it's
Mm.
like certain countries, 6'1's really tall. Certain countries, like in the Netherlands, you just lost your advantage, right? There's a
Average height.
tall, yeah, average height, right? So it's like, but if you were 6'4", which might be too high, too tall in some places, Netherlands might be a good fit. Those tall Dutch girls might love it.
Mm.
So that's one tip I'd have for people is like go where you like. I always did well in Eastern Europe. I always did well there. Like that was always the thing. Whereas in London, I didn't do so well in London. Like
Mm.
so to me it was like just go where you want it. But so pictures did well. Go where you wanted. I had the pictures, but then I text. I'm a horrible texter, David. I don't know what to say. I mean, luckily I don't have this. Maybe I'll text my girlfriend later using this advice actually. But what's your text advice? Help a brother out.
Never ask anyone how the day is.
It's kind of boring. How you doing?
It's really boring. And also, when it comes to kind of texting and messaging, the same on dating apps is you want to take people out of the like doing of life, the kind of logical sequential piece, because it's just kind of boring. Like, what did you do with your day? And then it gets me into like, I woke up, I had some food, I did this, blah, blah, blah. Boring. You want to get people into feeling, right? Feeling and imagining. That's where we start getting interesting. Something as simple as like, what did you do today that you really enjoyed?
Okay, right. So getting, particularly women feeling, right? You get them into feeling, excitement. Yeah. What was the highlight of your day? But again,
or
is
like
that too
something you
hard a
did really.
question?
Or it could be you start with, I'm a big statements fan. Like I might talk about a bit. Like I might just be like, oh man, I was outside today, and it was so hot, and I was worried about get sunburn, which brackets has only ever happened once in my life. And I might talk about something I saw, right? And what's that for me? And then I might say, how was your day, right? Because I've gone a bit wild, because I can do that often do that in text messages. I might go into my kind of wild imaginary stories, and then come back to the grounded of like, how was your day? Then it's acceptable. But if you're leading with like, how was your day? And that's it. She doesn't want to reply to you. It's boring. She doesn't want to think about her day. Why? Because she was probably at work all day. She probably didn't do anything. Like the things she's thinking of are not the outstanding things. She's thinking of the mundane things.
Right.
So it's like you taking her away from just this mundane, like, what did you do? Like, how was that thing? It's like, what was cool today? What was really great today? Or this is where you take the profile and you kind of start to like dive a bit deeper into it, asking about people's interests and the things they show. And also noticing really like, the shoes comment you said before, those sorts of details go a really long way because it just shows that you have this really precise awareness. Like, oh, you're actually paying attention.
You see in her photos, you're like, hey,
say what you see. I always say this to guys: say what you see.
Good one.
What do
you
see?
One, right? Statements.
Just say what you see. Yeah, keep it simple. Say what you see. Like it might be, I can't quite make out those books behind you, right? But if I could sit down and I could zoom in, I might go, oh, there's a book there about, I don't know, Western philosophy, for instance. I might say, God, I've never really thought about diving deep into Western philosophy. Like, who's one of your favorite philosophers in there? Instantly, it's like, wow, you had the presence to notice some small detail, but you know enough about the subject to ask a question that's relevant. And we always know enough about, well, we should do. A man should know enough about most things to be able to ask a question, a sensible question about it. In my eyes, that's, I think it was described as being, many years ago, I remember reading something. It was like, be a Renaissance man, a man that has a little bit of interest in a lot of things.
My friend met the Queen before she died and said that she used to do knighthoods, right? And he was an Aikido guy and he got knighted. And he said the Queen knew a little bit about Aikido. And she didn't know a lot, but she knew enough to have a conversation with. And then she moved to the next guy and it was about cookery. And the next guy was about horse riding. And she just knew a little bit about different topics so she could then begin the conversation and ask intelligent questions. And he was really impressed by that because she was like, how does she know about Aikido? But that's a rounded education, right?
Yeah. Like when I think of Aikido, there's a book I read many years ago called Mastery by George Leonard, right?
Oh, great book, yeah.
And I've read that book multiple times and I always recommend that book to people. And I could easily, it's a tenuous link, right? It's a tenuous link, right? I read a book once that mentioned something. And that's another way that we can kind of spark conversation. Tenuous links.
Right.
Between things. It might.
Yeah, I could do that one. I could totally do that one. I'll be like, oh, is that is that Coolio behind you? Okay, Gangster's Paradise. Like we can easily go into something, even if it's just a way of talking about it. Openers are tricky, right? So I'm on, years ago, I was on Bumble. I think I still got it. And women, I don't know if it's still the case, but women open on that. And women's openers are horrible. They're like, hi,
Horrible.
hello. Because they've never really had to do it, because on most apps, it's the guys doing it. And one thing I did learn from some of the guys who do like the men stuff was statements as openers. So, hey, I noticed this about your profile. And as you say, it's just say what you see again, right? Rather than saying, hi, how are you? It's you look like a lawyer. And if they're not a lawyer, you're still in a conversation. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm a teacher, but I just dressed really smart. Oh, cool. Now we're talking about clothes, right? So it's like, that's just a way better opener, whether it be online or in person. Like, you know, hey, you look French, you know, this classic kind of men's guys kind of stuff opener, but at least it gets people in a conversation, right? As opposed to where are you from, which is pretty boring for most people.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you might, and this comes from having some awareness of like, oh, I see this person. It might just be like, you know, you remind me, let me tell you this. Actually, once I opened on a dating app, it was on Field years ago, and I saw this girl's profile and I was like, you know what, this might sound really, really random, but where your picture, your third picture, it looks just like a place that I went to in Ethiopia a number of years ago. And I absolutely love Ethiopia. And I said a few things about the food and the culture and so forth. She replied next day, she was like, oh my God, this is Ethiopia. I'm in this place, right? And then we got into a whole conversation about Ethiopia. Now, I could have been completely wrong that she was in Bolivia or something like that.
Yeah.
But like in saying that thing, I'm kind of putting myself out there, and I'm willing to talk about my life and what I've been up to and share something about myself that could spawn some conversation if I was wrong. And if I'm right, the conversation goes on.
It shows you're an interesting guy who's lived abroad, who's curious, who knows a bit about culture. How's Ethiopia different than Bolivia, where she is now? You're still in a good conversation, right?
We're still in a conversation.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, because it's a dead end kind of conversation. And it's why even, you know, when I've worked with guys this many years ago, worked with guys who are approaching women in the street or in bars and stuff like that, it's like, look at someone, say what you see, but create some imagination around it. Like, you know, I remember once a guy I worked with, he walked up to a woman in the street. It was on Regent Street. It was a long, long time ago, maybe 15 years ago. And the compliment he gave her was amazing. I can't remember the exact detail. It's like, you look like a lawyer, come hippie, it was something else like barista. And she was kind of stopped and looked at him. It was a very dirty look. And she was like, what do you even mean by that? And then he just broke it down. He was like, oh, there's this part, the way that you walk is actually very elegant and this thing you're wearing, this handbag you've got and blah, blah, blah. And she, as soon as he explained it, she opened up, she smiled, she laughed because it was partly funny. And she was like, that's something no one's ever described me in that way. And then she went on to say like, oh, actually, like this bag, you're in a conversation. You've shown that you have some awareness and you have some interest in the world and you have some understanding of the aesthetics of things and where things come from and how things are linked to each other. And you're willing to kind of put that out there. And I think that goes such a longer way than this boring type of what you doing, what are you up to, what did you do today, what are you doing tomorrow, what are you doing tonight conversation. It's all about the doings of life. Like we're so caught up in the doings. We want to escape. We want to escape from the mundanity of life.
I love adventure ones. It's like, you know, you could be a pirate and here's why. Or, you know, all in black, you're kind of like a ninja. Or, you know, if I was a superhero forming a squad, you'd be this superhero that gets a squad. Because now we're in just like that fun conversation. It's a feeling based. It's silly. It's maybe a bit cheeky, you know? Oh my God, we're running out of time. David, I feel like I've talked way too much on this just because it's a juicy topic. You're fun to talk with. Let's do some quick David Chambers advice then. Some quick fire. 5 things. This is really aiming at the guy. So 5 things every guy needs to be attractive. Just hit us with the bullet points.
Confidence. Embodiment. You need to be able to feel and feel you. Cultivation of presence. A uniqueness, like a life that you are uniquely engaged in. I think that's 4 things. And I think that
an awareness of the personality.
World. But also awareness of the world, like an awareness of the world, its issues and what's going on. You don't have to be like really like you're knee deep in politics and stuff like that, but having an understanding of like, oh, there's a war here, and there's like women's rights are there, and there's trans rights things are here. It's like, so that when you're with people, you've always got something to talk about.
Nice. 5 areas of embodiment, psychology, personal growth that people can learn from that will really help them on maybe the deeper aspects. We're doing like tricks and tips, but like you mentioned attachment theory, right? Like listeners, listen to the episodes from Adam Lane Smith on attachment theory if you want to go a little bit deeper into who you're attracted to and why. So attachment theory, give me 4 more of like things people need to learn about.
Attachment theory, shadow work.
Nice.
Shadow work, very important. What else? Breath.
Okay.
James Nestor's book, Breath, you know, it really revolutionized how you sit and breathe. I think there's emotional work. I won't call it emotional intelligence, because I think intelligence implies it's heady. It has to be like embodied emotional work with yourself, your own reactivity and so forth, which comes in with the shadow work. What else kind of concepts you have to understand? Polarity.
Polarity is a big one, right? That's an embodied thing, like the data stuff. It's not everything, but I always say, like, if you understand polarity, attachment, and trauma, you're probably going to do well. You're probably going to do okay, because your trauma patterns aren't playing out. You're attracted to the wrong people. The attachment patterns aren't playing out, and we can get a bit of sizzle going with the polarity. But polarity without doing the trauma and attachment work, that's not so smart. That's such a good idea. Yeah. Nice. There's one thing I want to ask you about. There's a sort of slight movement back towards more conservative values in myself, but also in a lot of guys I know who have done personal growth. Maybe they went through a sort of slut stage, you know, male or female. They went through it like I did, right? And then, you know, eventually they went, you know what, this is kind of empty. And actually there's more to sex than just fun and entertainment. There's actually a thing here that's really special. And, you know, I got in trouble with it, even though I was trying to be consent conscious and pretty informed that way. I was treating it, as I'd been educated by the liberal media, essentially as a toy, right? And nobody ever told me how to find a good wife. That wasn't, or talked a bit about the mother of my future children. This was not part of my education. And now I see this pushback, like Jordan Peterson saying this is how to find a good wife, or, you know, and amongst women as well, you know, saying like, hey, body count maybe does matter. Maybe slut shaming should be a thing again, a bit radical. I would certainly slut shame my younger self and say, hey, this isn't wise. You're lucky you're not getting AIDS, man. You know, you're lucky you're breaking some hearts. That's not cool. You know, you're getting in trouble. It's not cool. What do you think to this movement back towards a slightly less liberal way of looking at sex?
It's like this way of looking at sex. I think it's almost quite it's why I think it's really odd in a way is because in the liberal world, and if you know, I'm not a big fan of the word woke because I think it's been kind of co-opted, but in that world, it's a lot about impact, right? Not just intention, but also impact. But this kind of swing back towards more conservative sexual values is about impact. It's about impact. Like, what's the impact on me? What's the impact on other people? And maybe come to the realization that as much as we want the world to be really free and open, and people to be free and open, people are still human beings, right?
Right. Even if I try hard to be consent culture, someone's still going to get hurt, you know?
Exactly. I can go to some orgies or some tantra retreats, and I can be the most conscious consent warrior in the room, right? But the problem is ultimately that other people have their trauma and their pain and their wounding, and they're going to perceive things differently. They're going to delete information and not know it, right? And that's going to hurt people. And I've been in some spaces where people are so on consent and everything, and then all it takes is one person to, in that moment, be a bit triggered and not be able to say, I don't want that, or I do want that, or I'm not sure about this, because we're still human beings. And I also think that as we kind of grow older, we shift and change what we want. We go through, I think, you know, for our 20s is this experimental stage into 30s, or less about age, more about maturity, where we are experimenting and we're individual, you know, this adolescence of individualness and like just doing my thing and not caring about the impact on others. And then I think we kind of move into a phase where we're more mature and we start wanting to have an impact maybe that's positive on the world around us. And to do so sexually or relationally, we have to realize that other people are human beings and that our actions and the way we treat them, even if we mean well, won't always land that way, right? And people can be judgmental about our body count, for instance. People, if you do have lots of sex and do lots of drugs and drink a lot of alcohol, you're likely to hurt people and you're likely to hurt yourself in the process. So it's seeing that kind of like more rippled out impact.
Yeah. There's the sense of like boundaries might not be a terrible idea, and there can be consequences even if you are trying your best and being careful and getting educated and all those things. Like I definitely learned that over the years, and some of it just comes with age, doesn't it? I mean, it's if I was talking to a 25-year-old, I might be like, have some fun, maybe just use condoms and try not to,
Exactly. It's like actually, I always say to people, and I said this with dating and everything, it's like you got to experience life. If you just live in a little shell of life. I've got a lot of friends who got married very, very young, at like 20, between kind of 20 and 24.
Yes.
And midway through their 30s, quite a few of them, their marriages broke down or had to really evolve because they just felt that they hadn't really lived life, and they were wanting to like explore a bit more because of the choices that they made early. And I think that we're here for a human experience, to have the human experience. But at some point, having all these different experiences and doing different things will settle into, what do I actually really want for myself and my life?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Let's finish with another last profound question. And this is the question all men must ask themselves sooner or later. Colombian or Ukrainian, or Brazilian or Russian, if you prefer. This is the choice for the rest of your life. I'm going to make you go either side. Which way are you going? Eastern Europe or Southern America?
Southern America every single time.
Listen, for my listeners, I apologize. That was my question. It wasn't David's fault. I forced him into it. Don't be offended. Shout out to my Colombian colleagues. Okay, so David, this has been fun. I knew it would be fun. Where do people find you online?
Easiest place to find me is Instagram, hanging out at the Authentic Man _. And then probably the second best place to find me is on my own podcast, The Authentic Man with David Chambers.
Okay, so David Chambers, Chambers, Authentic Man, his podcast, and also on Instagram. And you offer coaching to young guys as well, like guys, men, women. Just tell us a little bit about your coaching. I'll give you a chance to plug it.
Yeah, I work with men. I work with couples as well with my partner, and I run like different communities and programs for men. And one of the things I'm really enjoying at the moment, I've got a small community of guys, and we're just creating kind of brotherhood and friendship, but also growth and accountability and doing stuff in person together. Like, on Saturday, we all hung out in central London and did some sauna and did some men's circle and challenged each other with difficult questions. And it was a beautiful day.
Doing a similar thing in Slovenia. Men need men, and real in-person brotherhood with accountability as well as fun and growth. That sounds fantastic, David. If I was in London, I'd be asking where you'll get naked. All right, let's leave it there. David Chambers, thank you very much.